Kanuta mihi kia koutou te hao kāinga. Welcome councillors, staff, members of the public to this council meeting, C21/14. And I'll call for apologies, please. We have one for lateness from Grant Daly, but that's the only one. Can I have a move in a second, please? Councillor Daniel, Councillor Marsh, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Yes, no, carried. Consideration of late items. We have had one request for a late item, which we'll take on at the end of the agenda in the public session. Are there any declarations of interest, conflicts of interest?
We just have to move and second the late item.
No, there's not. We'll now move into the public forum, and we have several requests in order of coming in. Mr. Wainwright, we've got half an hour for this, and if you could take about 5 minutes, 3 minutes to speak, and then time for questions. So, and there's a little red button, a little button up there you push on the microphone so that those that are in Zoom can hear you. And just reminding everybody, this is being recorded, so anything that is said, there is no sort of help if you say anything that's defamatory. Sorry.
Okay,
So,
good morning. My name is Wayne Wright. I've been a resident of Omokoroa for the last 39 years. The government has delayed Three Waters until early next year. They say it's because they want to wait for a report from their Three Waters working group of 9 hand-picked mayors, 9 iwi representatives and 2 officials to advise on how co-governance would work in practice. But in reality, this delay is damage control aimed at quelling the criticism over the lack of consultation. With its restrictive terms of reference and a selected membership largely supportive of the reforms, no substantive changes are expected from the working group's February report, and there's little doubt it will be spun by the government as an important round of consultation. Despite its significance, Labor's argument for reform lacks any credible foundation. It is based on unreliable data, bogus advertising, exaggerated benefits, and fabricated treaty partnership claim. Furthermore, through their multi-million-dollar public interest journalism fund, the government is preventing the media from investigating the treaty partnership claim on which co-governance is based by requiring those who participate in the fund to proactively promote treaty partnerships under Titariki o Waitangi, acknowledging Maori as a Titariki partner. Then there's the advertising campaign, which has already been discredited and shown to be false. That cost taxpayers $3.5 million, with further $500,000 spent on a website claiming councils were failing to keep water clean and safe, and implying the answer was amalgamation. It even went as far as depicting green slime coming out of showers and waterways turning into sludge. When the ad first screened, most of the country's mayors were outraged that such insulting and alarmist misinformation was being promoted by the government, and they called for the campaign to be abandoned. But the government refused. The Public Service Commission said it failed to meet the accurate and factually unbiased test and had to be withdrawn. A water contamination incident in Havelock North in 2016, when farm runoff sapped into an aquifer used for town supplies during a storm causing widespread illness, is being used as a catalyst for the reforms. The reality is there's no drinking water crisis in New Zealand. This advocacy advertising is really political propaganda that has no basis in fact, and is deliberately designed to scare the public into delivering the fiction created by Labor to advance its own agenda, which is tribal rule over New Zealand by 2040, which the Maori control of water is a key objective. Bruce Smith, the Mayor of Westland District Council, is a leader who has been sharing his Three Water journey throughout the year. In his last update in 2021, he outlines the state of play. He said, Kiwis will not support the loss of local control. They will not support having the Three Waters assets owned by councils placed into a large corporate entity with a 50% of the governance councils and 50% iwi. Thus, they are saying it's undemocratic, and we are one people, not two tribes. Bruce outlines the mistruths and how he and other councils are fighting back. Government has consistently maintained that councils will continue to own their water assets, and to me, that has proven to be misleading at best. Through a statement of claim filed in the High Court, 3 councils are asking the courts to provide a legal affirmation of their position and their ownership of assets. This should provide a legal framework of shared understanding for all parties going forward on the key issues of council asset ownership and its democratic responsibilities. Without a doubt, Three Waters has become a major battleground between the government attempting to elevate iwi into permanent ruling class and Kiwi fighting to defend ratepayer rights, democracy, and our way of life. Mayor Bruce Smith assures us that most local authority mayors are pushing back against Three Waters, but he reminds us the power rests with the people. Our mayor, who is a member of the Three Waters Working Group, says this proposed amalgamation is a good thing. The majority of ratepayers say it's not. The council should listen to the ratepayers, and you can vote to resist this proposal course of action by supporting Councillor Granger's motion. Any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions? No, it appears not. Thank you.
May I ask?
Can we? Oh,
May
sorry.
I ask, Mr. Wright, you're saying you prefer the status quo and that if there is a need, that's something that should be worked out with local government and central government in a way that's democratic?
No, I think the government should create a fund available to councils, not dissimilar to roading and other things, where when they've got a problem, they make an application, they get either a low interest, no interest loan, they fix their roads or their water, solve their roads, their water, depending which one it is, and get on with life instead of this bureaucracy that, in my experience, will be a disaster.
Thank you for that. There's no further questions. Could you leave that behind so we've got a copy of what you with Horoway and the quality, please?
I actually bought 2 sets.
Oh, thank you very much. We now call on Mr. Keith Hay, please.
Great.
Thank you for the opportunity.
No, sorry, if you could just press the one on the right, I think it is. Oh, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning on behalf of the Caticat Waihi Beach Residents and Ratepayers Association. As far back as August this year, it was general knowledge that local government New Zealand was trying to encourage councils to opt into Minister Mahuta's Three Waters program. We realised that this proposal was not going to solve all the problems with Three Waters in New Zealand, and in fact was going to have serious adverse effects on most ratepayers. Local government New Zealand have been pushing their localisation program very strongly over the last few years. They wanted central government to hand over responsibility for a whole range of central government's functions to local government. Now, suddenly, they are advocating that central government take over Three Waters functions from councils with little or no compensation. So why have they done such an about-face? We obtained a copy of the funding agreement between local government New Zealand and the Department of Internal Affairs under the Official Information Act. It took 27 working days and 2 reminders, but we eventually got a heavily redacted version. And it turns out that DIA are paying LGNZ 2.06 million, with more to come, for their help in convincing councils that Three Waters is a good deal for them. And this is happening at much the same time that DIA was trying to convince ordinary New Zealanders that it would be a good deal for them also with those disgusting TV advertisements. The variation agreement to the funding agreement was signed on November 2021. This is between LGNZ and DIA, and states the goal would be to work with DIA and the sector to find suitable alternative frameworks that could work within the agreed model at a WSE level. And if no suitable alternatives are developed, then the current model will be adapted. Nowhere in either of these 2 agreements is the governance of the WSEs discussed. It is our opinion that Minister Mahuta never had and still doesn't have any intention to change the governance of these entities. It is this governance structure that is most abhorrent to our members. Now, Mr. Webber wrote to the Prime Minister on 8th November expressing Council's, quote, acute disappointment at the decision to mandate reform, but he makes no mention of this abhorrent governance structure. And that is what we dislike most about this proposal, Mr. Webber. Local Government New Zealand was active in conning councils that this proposal would be good for them. The steering committee was a sham, but we were paying the previous CEO to be on it. The working party is a sham, but we're paying our mayor to be on it. That is unacceptable. We think our councillors should have recognised this earlier, but we hope you have recognised it now and will vote accordingly later today. We commend Councillor Granger for introducing this notice of motion. We hope it is passed unanimously so as to show the government that this district rejects the proposed governance provisions absolutely. We call on council to resign from LGNZ because LGNZ have betrayed council's trust. Failing that, they should join with other councils in demanding the resignation of Stuart Crosby as chair of LGNZ. Mr. Webber has been intimately involved in shepherding this proposal along, having his CEO on the steering committee, refusing any consultation while claiming that council would make the decisions in the best interests of ratepayers, and accepting a position on the working party. We think that he should resign from that committee and resign also as mayor of this council. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Hay? Councillor Dean.
Mr. Hay, could you clarify which aspects of the governance structure you find a quote abhorrent?
Well, all of it. The fact that our assets are being taken and given to an organisation that we have no control over.
Thank you. Councillor Henry.
So would you see that there was a need for some regulation and enforcement of the practice of caring for our three waters, and the organisation that is in place now, that Taumata Arawai, was a good decision for regulation?
Yes,
entity?
I think
that
that's
part
good.
you
Yes.
would be fine with, but
Yep.
you're talking about the stage two.
Definitely, yeah. And
Yeah.
I think there are other ways of getting around the problem, like Waikato District Council has the Auckland Water Care look after their water for them. Other councils have sort of joint ventures that look after their water, like the councils around Wellington have one organisation to look after water.
This organisation is a nationwide, so it's, getting what the desired thing is, that there's a consistency of water care across the country. So you're supportive of that?
Of Taumata Arawai,
Yes,
yes, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Murray-Bench.
Mr. Hay, do you agree with Councillor Wright that instead of this...
Councillor Wright.
Sorry, Wainwright.
Next term.
Just anticipating. So did you agree with Wainwright that instead of all this bureaucratic nonsense, that we actually have from central government cheaper loans so local government can continue to do what it does well?
Yes, I think central government needs to front up with a lot more money, because they've given councils a lot more stuff to look after and aren't helping with financing that.
Right. Thank you for that. There appears to be no further questions. Thank you very much. If you've got a copy, could you leave it with the lady in the corner?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Hay. We now call on Ross Gowdy.
Good morning, Councillor, Your Worship, the Mayor, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to support the motion. Thank Councillor Granger for particularly bringing this motion to the council so we can have a reasonable conversation about it. Thank you. Today, this council has to decide which side of history they wish to be on. Very important. It's pertinent to, well, that's the question that is asked about climate change, but today it is that question. Do you want to go ahead with the shambles of what is the Three Waters charade at the moment, or do you want to actually stand up for the ratepayers? Are you prepared to stand aside while assets owned by the ratepayers of Western Bay District Council are transferred off the council's balance sheet? If they go to the entity which is in the intention of the Three Waters bill, you don't have them. Are you agreeing to the confusing methodology of the proposal? Well, as a business case, you would never agree to it because there's nothing there that you could actually pin down, particularly financially. Are you happy with the ever-changing deadlines and supposed consultation periods? Well, it's well documented what has happened, what has not happened, and what has changed. I won't go into the ins and outs of. And has the process been open, transparent and genuine? You have to actually question that. Yesterday, I waded through the 110 pages of the draft bill. Several clauses stood out. This is not an exact quote, because this morning I couldn't find it to actually do it. The need to be genuine and transparent in the consultation. It's mentioned several times during the bill that you need, and it's not for the entity that's actually asking the question, it is for the recipient to ask, is that genuine? And is this up to stretch? So please, council, put a stake in the ground today and attempt to have a say about Three Waters' proposal. Do not roll over and stand up for your ratepayers. I thank you very much. That is short and sweet. You've all heard the details. You all know the details. You really do need to put a stake in the ground. I hope you do today. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Gowdy? I have one. You're referring to the water services bill, were
Yes.
you?
Yes.
Right, which is different to the Three Waters, but
It is in akin to.
I understand. Yes. Right. Thank you. Councillor Henry.
I'll ask the same question that I did with Mr. Hay. In terms of the Three Water reform, are you supportive of the regulator as the Taumata Otawai as being the regulator of the water and the enforcer and indeed a supporter of councils if they need to get their water up to speed?
Yes, I am fully in support of that because it's been lacking in the last 20, 25 years. The health department didn't do their job. But at the same time, I'm also supportive of not being privatised too, which is just a side issue as far as I'm concerned. Water and those sort of things shouldn't be privatised in New Zealand, and everyone supports that. But the rhetoric and the direction of other parts of the whole water services thing, as our first speaker today said, there are other ways to fix the problem. And that is not being allowed to even be discussed.
Sorry, just a comment rather than a question. Are you aware that the leader of the National Party and the leader of the ACT Party have agreed with Labor that the privatisation principles, they're comfortable with it?
Yes, I am well aware of that.
So, thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much.
you.
If you've got your notes, could you leave them with
Yes, I
Holloway,
will.
please?
Thank
Thank
you.
you. We now call on Mr. Bruce McCabe, please.
Good morning. I'm Bruce McCabe. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Amalkara Residents and Ratepayers Association in support of the motion tabled by Councillor Granger to join with other local authorities to mount a challenge to the government's Three Waters proposal, which is item 10.7 on the agenda. I support this motion because, firstly, I see it as a fundamental responsibility of local government to act in the best interest of the ratepayers. Secondly, through this ill-conceived Three Waters program, council has consistently let ratepayers down. And thirdly, there is a large-scale ratepayer opposition to the Three Waters program, as evidenced by more than 600 unsolicited submissions being received by council in opposition to the proposed reforms. And fourthly, I see the involvement in the collective action against the Three Waters program as the only remaining way of preventing legislation being passed that will be detrimental. Testing? Yes. Now, why am I of the opinion that council has let ratepayers down and not acted in their best interests? Firstly, in June, when the government announced the Three Waters program and had agreed to mandate it whilst lying to local authorities that the public that they were able to opt out, Mayor Webber publicly stated that councils had no option but to go with what the government dictated, and I believe that this should have happened 10 years ago. The Mayor from the get-go has been politically partisan and actively supporting the Three Waters program, despite his statement that our water infrastructure meets national standards. When other councils were consulting with ratepayers and determining whether the Wicks report was fit for purpose, our council sat on its hands and did nothing. The Three Waters model is politically motivated, delivering control for iwi, and not technically competent, and has been shown by the Castilla and Morrison Lowe reports to be deeply flawed, biased, and incorrect. In other words, it's not fit for purpose. Auckland's Mayor Phil Goff has publicly castigated the government for not analysing the CCO model employed by Auckland, despite Minister Mahuta dishonestly saying it had. The council officer's assessment of the impacts of the Three Waters program on our community was tabled and discussed further by me at the October council meeting. This showed that the Three Waters program will have a raft of negative effects and that council should have, on the basis of this report, opted out of the Three Waters program, as have 60 of the 67 local authorities in New Zealand. The Three Waters program is modelled on Scottish Water, which is no more than a lazy government department not accountable to its customers, producing the worst water in the UK, with a sewage spill record worse than the worst performing New Zealand system. Last year, they reported 12,725 sewage spill events. 12,725, that's more than 35 a day, into rivers and beaches with a total volume of 48 million cubic metres, up 40% on 2016. Scottish Water cannot get its shit in order, and none of you councillors have ever thought to question whether it is an appropriate model to use to improve Three Waters service delivery in New Zealand. The Three Waters Bill will require councils to collectively own the Three Water assets and cede control of these assets to a separate legal entity that they have no control over. This will trigger special consultation under the Local Government Act, and council, being the owners of the assets, will be legally liable for any malfeasance on the part of the entity without being able to control the entity. The Mayor's personal political well-being should not be the driving force behind council policy, and councillors should base their decisions on sound, objective advice. This has so far not happened, and the Mayor's bullying style and political motivation seems to have prevailed, resulting in council not acting in the best interests of ratepayers. The motion tabled by Councillor Granger is, in my opinion, the last opportunity for council to do the right thing by ratepayers, and indeed for the country as a whole. And I strongly recommend that you all support this motion. Thank you.
Are there any questions of Mr. McCabe? Councillor Granger.
Thank you, Bruce. Do you agree that council should obey the law of the land?
Absolutely.
So then there is absolutely nothing wrong with the mayor saying councils had no option but to go with what the government dictates.
At that point, no one was aware, perhaps other than the mayor and a few other people, that the government was actually going to mandate what was going on. The message that was given publicly, and I think most councillors would be in agreement with this, was that there was going to be a period of consultation, feedback, and councillors would have the option to opt in or opt out based on their particular position. So that question is rather disingenuous. It assumes that no one knew what the actual decision Cabinet had actually made.
I'll leave it there.
Thank you. There appears to be no further questions. Thank you very much for that. We now call on Mr. Ken Shirley.
Thank you, Mayor, Councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to address this forum. I've been a resident of Omokoroa for the past 3 years. Previously, I was a Minister of the Crown in the 4th Labor government. I worked for my first 10 years as a scientist in water resource management in both Wellington and the Nelson region. And for 10 years, I was the deputy leader of the ACT Party in Parliament, the first 10 years of that party in Parliament. To begin with, I'd like to congratulate Council. I think many councils, but this council in particular, has done a splendid job, particularly over the last 15 years, through a period of rapid growth and rapid urban development, in ensuring that we have world-class potable water, world-class sewage services, and of course, stormwater is locally done on a catchment by catchment basis, as it should be. And as already has been mentioned, we have the Havelock North aberration. That was a one-off aberration that has been remedied. But to use that as an excuse to impose the structure that we see in this process that's called Three Waters, I think is an absolute nonsense. Can we manage our stormwater, drinking water and sewage better? Yes, the answer to that is always. And I think earlier speakers have already touched on some of the obvious things that can be done better, obviously economies of scale, but we're seeing increasing cooperation between councils, as you will appreciate. We've got the Auckland example, the Wellington example, even here in Tauranga, the sewage is done collectively between the councils. That's the way I believe it should be dealt with. The other benefit, of course, can be with economies of scale is better access to expertise. That is important, but there's much simpler and smarter ways of doing it than what's proposed under this project. I think the big one, of course, is, and it's already been touched on, is central government needs to be more active in leveraging funding and supporting local government. For decades, I've seen more and more responsibilities devolve to local government without the funding. And government, of course, is, when you see urban development, they make massive amount of money through the GST and the other revenues that flow to central government, but they don't recognise the costs that are imposed on local government, and local government has clearly struggled in many respects. But those matters can be very easily and simply rectified. The Three Waters campaign is dishonest, deceptive and misleading. The Water Services Entities Bill, just to quote it right up front of the policy statement, for water services entities that will provide safe, reliable and efficient water services in place of local authorities. And I emphasise that, in place of local authorities. The government TV ads were just disgusting propaganda, and I've already been called out for that. But I think most New Zealanders were outraged by those TV ads that we unfortunately all had to pay for. Local government minister Nanaia Mahuta is shown to be disingenuous and duplicitous throughout this process. Local government were invited to make submissions to the minister by the end of September, seeking clarification and a promise of 2 months to consider whether to opt in or opt out. And you were urged not to consult with ratepayers until more information is available. That was effectively a gagging order, and some like suckers fell for it. Many councils do consult widely with communities, and good on them. That was the responsible thing to do. Unfortunately, this council did not, and that is deeply regrettable. But in spite of this, I understand you received 642 unsolicited submissions by the 11th of November. None of these supported the government's proposal. And then we had the real clanger. On the 27th of November this year, 1 month later, after the end of September, Minister Mahuta announces that local councils and communities have no choice but to opt in, can't opt out. The 3 water structures and processes will be mandated. And cabinet papers reveal that she and her colleagues had in fact taken this predetermined position several months earlier. Those are the facts. So local government was duped and played for suckers. Local government New Zealand was paid $2 million to promote 3 waters and not oppose the mandating of it. They were duped. I think many mayors and councillors did resist. Others were no more than compliant, sycophantic toadies. If we look at governance and accountability structures, what we see here is the creation of a convoluted, bureaucratic and divisive monolith. I've never seen anything like it in all my time in government, quite frankly. It is doomed to fail. It is emasculating local government by stripping away core functions. And in fact, the very raison d'etre of local government will be stripped away by this. And who knows what's coming down the pipeline. Because this is clearly the stalking horse for a much wider and a more dangerous agenda by the current government based on dual governance. So I, like others, urge this council to support Councillor Granger's motion. I think is the only option that is available to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Shirley? It appears not. Thanks, Mr. Shirley. Appreciate your time. And
Thank you.
If you leave, can you leave your notes behind or?
Just notes, but happy to, yes.
Right, thank you. We now call on Mr. Mike Hickey.
Your Worship, the Mayor, councillors, council staff, members of the public. My name's Mike Hickey. I've been coming to Waihi Beach since I was 4 years old. I'm passionately interested in the beach. I'm a member of the Environmental Society, help with the planting the dunes and that sort of stuff. And I'm a life member of the Waihi Surf Club. And I've accumulated educational and work and business experience throughout the world, as evidenced by my CV, dating back to 1957. questions I'd like to ask this morning are, one, when will the next physical Waihi Beach Community Board meeting be held? The last one was back in August, 4 months ago. We used to have them on a Monday, first Monday of the month, then they were reduced to every 6 weeks, and then they've been reduced to every 8 weeks, 2 months. So much for local opinion. Two, the Mayor was quoted on the 2nd of December in the New Zealand Herald as predicting 20,000 holiday visitors to Waihi Beach. Has the council liaised with police to prepare for the predicted invasion, which started yesterday? 3, has the council appointed anyone to monitor the Waihi Beach bylaws from yesterday until the 7th of February 2022? 4, are there any plans to restore on Citrus Avenue and Road Mark 20, there's at least 25 of the unmarked intersections on the beach at Waihi before the holiday influx? Some of these intersections you could mark a tennis court on and the traffic just goes anywhere. I'm a cyclist and I find it quite dangerous. Number 5, has the council appointed anyone to actually monitor the Waihi Beach bylaws from yesterday until the 9th of February? In the last 2 weeks, there have been 2 incidents where people have been bitten by roaming dogs, and a small child, about 4-year-old, was frightened the other day. I witnessed it by a dog roaming from a beachfront rental property. One of the residents had to have a tetanus injection. Unleashed dogs have probably been a factor in the big reduction in doctoral numbers, despite the best efforts of DocWatch. Core business. Doggy days out. Is this core business? Doggies having a swim in the Te Puke swimming pool, this sort of thing. This is not core business. In times of COVID, we want to be spending money on essentials. Logos. The new logo, how much did that cost? To me, it reminds, I'm no art appreciator, but it sort of reminds me of a broken, cracked eggshell facing backwards. Promotion of certain areas at the expense of others. The last Lizard News, we had all what's happening in Omokoroa. What's being spent at Waihi Beach? We've got, although they're not all there all the time, they're still paying the full rates. $8.25 a page. So there's a few things to think about. How much did the logo cost? Is that an essential? I don't think so. I'm a practical, real person. I've taught at all levels of the education system, from tiny tots, the cats sat on the mat and 2 and 2 is 4, ring bells and play fish, right through to a university in Kentucky. Coincidentally, where there's been tragic happenings in the last few days, 11 people killed in the town I lived in. I'm a practical person and I don't stand for any nonsense. I've still got my teacher's ticket and I can still manage the kids without touching them. Now, anyone?
Are there any questions that anyone might have? Councillor Henry?
The question is, have you seen the ambassadors that have on the beach that are out currently working at the moment? We have one permanent in the beach from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock each day.
Well, this is where communication comes in. No one at the beach has been told about it. I'm in the surf club, I'm in Environment Society cycling group. and everything just about but the bathtub. And I don't know about it. There's no communication.
Given it is hard to find, but those sorts of communications are on the website, Western Bay District Council /news, and you put that in your search and it will come up. All the news.
I'm too
articles
busy
that
doing
Luke
practical
puts on there
things
for
to be
us.
sitting over a computer.
Any other?
That's what it is.
So we've got councillor Marsh.
You stated that the dogs are swimming in the Kipupi swimming pool. Is that right?
Well, I just see they're advertised as a doggy day out at Kipupi swimming pool. And over my career, I've been responsible for supervising many school pools from all around New Zealand on board a ship, working my way to England, and dogs.
We're talking about community pools here,
Yes,
and I would object to dogs swimming in community pools. So that's all you just mentioned.
yeah, well, I'm surprised at that sort of money being spent on that sort of promotion. I really am. I just can't figure it.
Right, thank you. Any other questions? There appears not. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Hickey.
Thank you.
Councillors, we now move back into formal session, and in terms of the late item I mentioned before, is somebody happy to move that we accept that? But-
I move that we accept the late item and that we take it first.
Can I finish?
Yes.
Thank you. The wording in here is that in accordance with section 46A in brackets 7 of the Local Government Official Information and Meeting Acts, the following item be considered as a late item of open business, and you want to add to it, and that it be taken as the next item on the agenda. Right. Right. Thank you very much. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, no. We now move to the late item, which is you should all have a copy of in front of you there. Everybody's got it in front of them on their iPad. Right, councillor Granger, the floor is yours. You're the mover and the.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'd like to thank all those who have given up their time this morning to come and support this motion in public forum, despite it not being public information until late yesterday. Everything we do here at Council is controlled and governed by the Local Government Act 2002. The first meaningful words after the title and commencement are the purpose, and it says the purpose of this act is to provide for democratic and effective local government that recognises the diversity of New Zealand communities. And to that end, this act states the purpose of local government and carries on. Section 10 then states the purpose of local government, which is the purpose of local government is to enable democratic local decision-making and action by and on behalf of communities and to meet the current and future needs of communities for good quality infrastructure, local infrastructure, sorry. What we have seen in the Three Waters reform process so far has been far from democratic. It removes local decision-making from our community, and the Act clearly states that it is Council's role to provide good quality infrastructure, something that Western Bay Council can be justly proud of having done to date. It is clear from the Cabinet papers that have now been released that there was never, ever going to be an opt-out option. The all-in legislated approach was set in stone long before any of the so-called consultation took place. Government by fiat is not democracy. During and immediately after the so-called consultation, this council wrote to the ministers requesting a modification to the current government proposals. The purpose of the campaign is to seek modification to the current proposals, something that Western Bay Plenty District Council has also asked for twice. Why would we abandon our community and stop asking now. Having twice stated in writing we want change, and given our duties and responsibilities under the Local Government Act, why would we not stand up and join with the other councils to oppose the undemocratic diktats of central government? Not doing so is a failure to uphold the solemn declarations that we each made when we were elected. I declare that I will faithfully and impartially execute and perform in the best interests of Western Bay District the powers, authorities and duties vested in me or imposed upon me as a member of Western Bay District Council by the Local Government Act 2002. We all signed that. Let's stand by it. Thank you.
Are you going to move the recommendation?
Move for the recommendation, sir. Yes.
Right. Do we have a seconder, please? Councillor Murray Bench. Normal process, I would say, are there any speakers for or against the motion? So can I say that now? Are there any speakers for or against the motion? Thank you. Councillor Murray Bench, Councillor Henry.
One of the great things about serving in the Western Bay of Plenty, and the good thing that has happened in local government, is that public forums have been created. It's one of the few good things that have happened in the term or two. And we've had our leaders in local communities come before us this morning and speak seriously and openly and informatively about the disastrous situation that we find ourselves in today. And it continues on. But the community at large is beginning to open up and understand. So yesterday, when all those mayors were in Wellington, it was a great shame that our mayor wasn't standing side by side with them, because together we can have an influence on central government. On our own, we're just chicken feed to whatever they want to put on us, and they dump on us regularly, central government. And I've been round long enough to be able to justify making that statement. And as Ken Shirley said, that always comes down without money coming with it, which is just deplorable, because the tax take keeps going up and people don't get the benefit of it. And I want to compliment Mr. Hay, because in his submission, he was saying that we should actually call for the resignation of Stuart Crosby and of the Local Government Association. I know that the Tauranga Timaru City Council has called for that, and I really believe that it's in our interests to do the same. This recommendation, this motion that's before us this morning, is the only sensible last thing that's left for us to do. And so I'm fully in support of it. But I'd like to go further than that, Mr. Mayor, and I'll move something later after the debate. But I want to thank those people who've come this morning and have highlighted, because of COVID, we have not had any public consultation with our community that's been fair and reasonable. And then we did the dumb thing of going out and telling them, now that the government's mandating, what do you want us to, what opinions do you want us to give to them? Which really was rolling over and saying they didn't, we're lost. But this puts us back in the game, and for that I appreciate what Councillor Granger has done. But I'm adamant this council has not done anybody in its community any favours with the way we have performed to date. So I'm pleased that at last we're nailing something down that makes good sense.
Thank you. Councillor Henry.
Okay, yeah. I am speaking in support of the motion, and I feel it is a good opportunity for our council to have their say when they have been denied having a say and taking this proposal out to their community. I want to clarify that when I'm talking about my decision to join with this, I'm not talking about the entity of Toi Mai Arohai, which I think is an absolute, and I think we need to make sure that those are two different things. I'm talking about the second stage. That's what I'm talking about, the localism going to central government. That's the control of our water assets. So I see it as democracy as we know it, shameful. It was taken away from us. The rhetoric around the local government did not mention at all when we were first introduced to that there was an embedded opportunity to actually mandate. Every council took the opportunity to better their water services across the district. And I'm very grateful of that because we've been able to help many of our marae with their water. So, but then to find out that the opportunity for the council then for the central government to mandate was a real kick in the guts, as some people would say. And I felt that too. This decision to mandate has actually denied local government to operate the way I believe, and when I came into local government, what I believe that we were to do. We were elected to represent our regions, to support the ratepayers' views, or represent the ratepayers' view, but we were also to take to our regions any significant proposals that were to come across the table and to gather their views. And with this mandated decision, we have been denied to be able to operate as local elected representative members. And I think that's shameful. So once again, this leaves us this only option to take legal action or legal action against the central government. So
sorry, the motion doesn't talk about taking legal action.
No, so thank you. Well, tell me what it was, because that's what I was struggling to say what it was.
Which is the council joins with the other that have signalled their intention to mount a challenge to the
challenge, that's it, thank you. And the other thing that reminds me, and we have it, we're witness to this in our region every day with our roading across the district being heavily reliant on central government managing it. We're victim to it in terms of our infrastructure. We are the fastest growing port, we're the busiest port in New Zealand, and yet we see in the paper yesterday 100 acres of rural land has been looked to be turned into commercial area into Rico. So once again, we've got this build up, but no infrastructure for our roading on the near horizon.
So just speaking for or against the motion?
I've already said at the beginning I was, and I'm just saying my reasons.
Yeah,
yes,
it's actually getting into roading and Taurico now as opposed to this.
Yeah, but it's like it's all part of why I'm saying I support it. So yes, thank you, Murray, for bringing this to the table, and I support it.
Thank you, Councillor Sol, and then Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Your Worship, and councillors, for this opportunity to speak today. Basically, first thing, Murray, Councillor Granger, I also am very strong about the oath that we take. And those that have contacted me in the past about this issue will be aware that I've said I've taken an oath and I've got to do the best for our district. And so I've tried to give it a chance. So I am speaking today in favour of the motion. But I just do not believe that the good faith is there in this whole thing. I consider it a scheme, and a scheme is something that's a little bit backroomish, a little bit pushed out there. It's certainly not a program and plan for a really good future and involvement of people. So over the time, basically, I can't say I've seen any improvement in it. But I do support where council has been in the past so far, and how we've actually given the authority to the mayor to actually still go and represent us to try and get a better deal or to make changes. To be honest, we may have a whole nest of rats to swallow. Let's hope we get something better than what we've got at present. And that is I guess, the backstop there. The bottom lines to me of this whole thing are the core to it, and the requirements and the governance issues and the moving of assets away from the public, etc., it's just not a good thing. So to me, if it has a tail, 4 legs and barks, it's a dog. This is a dog. To me, the structure really was quite bad. Long term, I also look at it and say, if we let the genie out of the lamp, how are we going to get that genie back in if we lose and move all those assets out? What is it going to cost perhaps our future generations to get back into some sort of control because this failed? And at present, I can't see anywhere where it's really going to succeed. So we must stop those assets from moving. We need to stop the progress of this bill as best we can. I basically, otherwise, I think I have other parts to this, but I will not go there today. I'm comfy to leave that alone at this stage. But I will say there is something about the people and so on. And I will go back to some of my Maori heritage. Okay? So, I will not go through my pepaha, but I will say that I am from Taranaki. My river is Warangura. Okay? My canoe is Aotea. I can tell you that my iwi is Ngāti Ruanui, and I will tell you that my hapu is Tupaia. I totally do not accept what's happening here and how this whole thing will go. To me, one key thing from Maori quotes, etc., comes back to he tangata. It is the people, it is the people, it is the people. The people are telling us, let's support the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh.
I guess I'm probably the longest serving member in here, and in all my time, I have never ever had this come to council that we've had to make a decision on like this today. I support what Murray Granger's just said, Councillor Granger. I guess that over the years, the ratepayers, we have worked our butts off, and it has cost this council in rates. We've been one of the highest rated councils in New Zealand, and people wonder why. We've got probably the best sewage systems and water systems of anywhere in New Zealand. The people have paid for that. I think we've got $136 million invested, somewhere about that, in what our infrastructure is. The government want to take that away from us, and they want to give us $21 million back in return. For what? Are we going to, if we have a broken water pipe at the moment, out in the country, out in the rural area, we can ring up, we can get someone out there, they will fix the town supply of water within a matter of hours. Are we going to get that if this goes to where this government intends it to go? I'm not in favour of what this one particular person in government is suggesting we do. I'm 100% against it. And I have never, ever spoken. I think there's 2 people that I've spoken to in the last probably 5 or 6 months. They're not in favour of this. And one is probably my sister-in-law, that probably she turns the tap on and the water comes out. That's fair enough. But there is all the people that I've spoken to and have spoken to me about this are not in favour of what this government is trying to do to us. We're doing a bloody good job ourselves. We don't need this interference from other people. Maybe some councils do, but we are not part of that. And if we do need it, I think they should give us a hand up with giving us some extra injection with money, not take it over and take it away from us. I was on that groundswell, what do they call it, road, the road, whatever you call it, but we went on and protest. And all those people, we were in the middle of Tauranga, and they stopped for, I think it was about 3 or 4 minutes. And all the people that were sitting down there on the Strand, there was not one person that was against what we were doing. They were all in favour of this 3 waters not going through. And they came up and said it. There was only one person that was driving a BMW or an Audi that couldn't get through. And I was in the truck with a stock crate on, so they couldn't get through. And they were absolutely, this lady was annoyed that we were there. But all the rest of the people out there having a beer for the weekend were happy with it. So I think what Murray Grange has just done is all the people in New Zealand or in this area would be supportive of us. So that's where I'm finishing. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers for or against? Councillor Daniel, Councillor Dean.
Let's be clear. This motion is not about expressing opposition for Three Waters reform. After all, the MOU that Council is being asked to consider signing, says reform of the Three Waters sector is required to meet health and environmental regulatory standards. It also supports the creation of Taumata Arawai, the new regulator. On the campaign's website, it goes on to say that they accept there is a case for investment and that Mana Whenua should be involved in Three Waters investment decisions. So what does this campaign aim to achieve? The only aspect of Three Water reform that it states it wants to avoid is the transfer of assets to another legal entity. If that is the campaign's key demand, I would like to know how it believes it can avoid the requirement for balance sheet separation in order to fund the $120 to $185 billion of capital investment that is estimated to be required without a huge and iniquitous government bailout of most councils. In answer to this question, the campaign's website says, no one disputes the need for investment, but there's a better way to achieve the government's objectives, and we want to work in partnership with them on that. That sounds to me like they have no idea beyond wishful thinking. Even the focus on a transfer of assets reveals the campaign's limited financial analysis of the situation. Given the level of infrastructure investment required, for many councils, it would probably be more accurately described as a transfer of contingent liabilities and debt that outweigh the current book value of the assets. No one values complex business operations on the book value of the assets. That's just financially illiterate. But as most councils have stated, including ours, the current reform proposals could be better, a lot better, which is why the government has tasked the newly formed working group to consider various alternative governance, representation, and accountability approaches that will, and I quote, likely achieve greater buy-in from the local government sector than the originally proposed approach. So ultimately, this campaign, which we're being asked to support, is merely an ersatz duplication, an inferior shadow of the government's working group that, instead of being free, cost us $15,000. Instead of having our mayor represent us, we will be represented by those from other districts. Instead of understanding and taking account of the realities of the debt capital markets, shows an embarrassing naivety about them. And instead of being inside the tent and having the ear of government, is outside the tent, being obstreperous and ineffectual. This funding is a waste of ratepayer money and a waste of political capital for a campaign that will not achieve anything, and therefore I cannot support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't support this motion either because I support the Three Waters reform. I won't go into the details of why because we've just heard it there, but in Tasmania, they did this reform in 2008. In 2017, the Auditor General of Tasmania commissioned a report to find out whether the reforms had been successful. And in general, the reforms had been very successful. And that is what the whole process is aiming at here. The amount of misinformation that has come through has been incredible. It has really worried me. And we've heard some of that misinformation here today. To have 600 emails come to council opposing Three Waters, and the ones that I read, which were a large proportion of those, were of 3 or 4 versions of exactly the same thing, which pointed to an orchestrated campaign. And I think that is not consultation that this council should listen to. Example, with giving away our assets. What's the difference between taxes and rates? It's exactly the same thing. We aren't giving away our assets. I believe that we should be part of the working group that has been set up by the Local Government Association to put proposals to government to modify this proposal. This is to do with change. Albert Einstein said, "The measure of intelligence is the ability to change." I hope that doesn't reflect on my fellow councillors. In conclusion, it's best to be in the team, as James said. Even some of the people that are for this motion said that it's best to be in the team. It's best to be in the team that is free, not the one that's going to cost us 15,000 and antagonise the people that we're trying to amend the proposal. So I'm opposed to this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Scrimger.
Yes, I won't be supporting this motion. I absolutely share the frustration of this process that we've been through, and Mr. Shirley referred to misleading advertising. I totally agree that that was uncalled for and unhelpful. They've played us for suckers. They came out with a proposal, that is, when I say they, central government, sat back and didn't do anything to explain it to the people, but left councillors to take the flak. That's appalling in my view. But why do we find ourselves in this situation? I think we need to reflect, and others have referred to it. We've had plenty of stick over the years about our high rates in the Western Bay of Plenty. And without going into the inaccuracies of some of the published figures and tables, we do know that our rates are comparatively high in this district, and particularly the Three Waters portion of our rates. But why is that so? My colleague, Councillor Murray Benge here, regularly reminds us that when she became a councillor here, the water quality delivered was E grade. That's right. Yes, thank you. And today it is B grade. That took considerable investment on the part of our ratepayers to achieve that. Similarly, we have a significant number of wastewater plants across the district, which all operate well and are fully consented. We have a neighbouring council that has 3 unconsented wastewater schemes and a wastewater charge that is less than half what ours is. In the reports a few weeks ago that we received was highlighted Tararua Council with 5 out of 6 of their schemes unconsented. And again, their Three Waters charges were only about half what ours are. We've been penalised. Our ratepayers have been penalised for obeying the law, for meeting the standards that they should do. I don't believe it's appropriate for us to join with councils who failed to meet their obligations but still want to fight this proposal. I accept the proposal as it stands has not been at all good, but I absolutely agree with the 2 previous speakers that it's important we work diligently and congenially with government to try and bring those proposals to a point where they can be accepted across councils. And further, I also take my oath of office obligations seriously, and I will be voting against this because I don't think it's an appropriate use of ratepayers' money to try and fight the proposal. It's much better to try and change it to meet something that is appropriate and that could potentially bring benefits to our ratepayers through lower charges. And so I will not be supporting this proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Thwaites, you want to speak next?
Thank you, Your Worship. I fully support the motion as in front of us, moved by Councillor Granger, seconded by Councillor Mo Bench. I fully disagree with the current Deputy Mayor that he states that this would be a waste. This is not a waste at all. This is a flawed concept. I have nothing against innovation and change. We've been doing that for decades around here. You know, our innovative approach with Tauranga to solve the Omokoroa solution was one. Our amalgamation of our waiting charging regime was another example. We are constantly evolving, but I think that the current Three Waters concept as it's proposed is flawed. It's putting together unnatural partners. In a rugby sense, I compare this to the Central Vikings, really, and we saw what happened to that. You try and push Manawatu and Hawke's Bay together. They had nothing in common except the gorge between them, and it never worked. It failed. Innovation is going to be the solution to solving this, and natural partners will aggregate together. I have no doubt about that. There will be further aggregation of these schemes, but that's what will drive the innovation. Just creating four big, lazy, central funded with layers and layers and layers of operation is just a recipe for failure, and Ken Shirley certainly summed it up in his presentation this morning. It will fail, and I believe it definitely will, and I'll be certainly part of the group to unwind it if it does ever get legs on it. So I fully support the recommendation, and I will be voting with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lynch.
Councillor Gray.
Sorry, Grace. Sorry, my apologies.
That's all right. Firstly, I just wanted to say thank you to Murray for tabling this as councillor and being brave to do so. I totally agree with my counterparts that the proposition in front of us is flawed and definitely needs work. I also take into account that we have previously sent letters of opposition and comments that the plan in its current form is not suitable. Having said that, I am here to represent our entire district, and that includes ratepayers who are not yet able to pay rates, so the next generation. I, like Councillor Sol, ko Taranaki, ko Te Atiawa Te Iwi, ko Aotea Te Waka, ko Pukitapu me Ngāti Te Whiti Te Hapu. Our rivers are hitting all-time lows. The cultural rights have been taken away. Discharges are still going into our awa. Relief packages for drought coming from government. Our next generation are going to be carrying the bill for this. We take for granted that we can turn on the tap here and get drinking water that is acceptable. There are places throughout the country that this does not happen. And just a reminder that tangata whenua are ratepayers as well. And I'm sick of hearing them being marginalised as a separate entity. Having said that, I am not voting in favour of this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Daly, the last one to speak.
Kia ora koutou. Apologies, if I'd known we would be allowed to read a speech, I would have written a speech. Normally I'm not allowed to read speeches, but I've made a few notes as I've been listening. And thank you to the submitters in our public forum this morning. Ken Shirley, it's nice to hear a different voice at the front table, and I've certainly noted what you've said. I've wavered on this motion backwards and forwards, and what I've heard this morning doesn't make where I'm heading any easier. However, just addressing a few things point by point, assets, public ownership of assets. Obviously, we're all proud of what the Western Bay has achieved with our wastewater and drinking water, and even the stormwater, the way that's coming along. Has come at a cost. We've been at the top of the table of the rates charges for many years in New Zealand compared to our other councils. And that is because we have made the bold decisions, whereas many other councils haven't. And it's interesting that I'm not really sure how these other councils plan on addressing these issues for themselves on their own. And so I do see benefit in economies of scale. I sort of agree with Mr. Shirley about this being a cumbersome behemoth, and it concerns me from that point of view. However, we've had a bit of a macro example of how this can be achieved when Western Bay amalgamated their Three Waters assets a few years ago. And at the time, Te Puke felt a bit disgruntled because the shakeout cost meant our rates went up. And when one of the main drivers of our rates from that time was building a brand new wastewater treatment plant about 25 years ago. And the first thing I heard when I came to Te Puke was why our rates were so high, and that was the reason. And at the time of the amalgamation, we'd pretty much paid it off and were almost in credit. But of course, the government, with all the new legislation that they continue to put through, meant that we couldn't let sleeping dogs lie, and there was a constant upgrade program planned for the Te Puke wastewater plant as well as all our drinking water. And so it has been beneficial to us all, I think, that we've amalgamated our Three Waters, and I can see benefit in doing the same on a national scale. The Scottish water model has been discredited, I agree, Mr. McCabe, and the Tasmanian water model is perhaps, like Mark said, has produced good benefits for that state, and I think there's lessons to be learned. And I'm aware that the governance group that will be established will be capability based and experience. I do see it as a onerous sort of task to be a governor on that board. The reading would have to be phenomenal, and any side gigs would have to be dropped, I would think, because just trying to get your head around what's happening in Taranaki and what's happening in the Bay of Plenty would be a nightmare process. But what we know is that the day-to-day operations of the waters will be delegated to the local areas, and we will also have capability-based managers and people in place to oversee the requirements. The fact that we are a growth area means that we will, and I assume the working party has already put some recommendations forward to ensure that the growth areas like ourselves will not be disadvantaged by this, and that will be a consideration. So after all that, I really sympathise with what I've heard this morning. To go down this track, and $15,000 is not a lot of money at the end of the day, but we know that that's only the start of it. But it's only 24 councils, 25 if we join, I suppose. But I think I'd rather be trying to get some change enacted in this working party, and you know, smaller entities or smaller controls or satellites within that entity have got to be considered. We've got to do the best we can with this working party and get the best result we can before the government puts it through the House, because it has been mandated. We can't change that, I don't think. I think this government is still going to push it through in March or April next year. So I don't support this motion, sorry.
Thank you. Being the last speaker, unfortunately, I can't support it. I understand the sentiment. I understand the frustration. But I'd like to back the truck up a little bit to when I campaigned in 2013, when the then national government were working on the Nick Smith famous thing of 90% of our rivers have to be swimmable. And in the legislation that he brought into play, which was the national policy statement on fresh water, I campaigned on the basis that, do you understand the unintended consequences of this legislation? Because buried in about page or Article 74 of the legislation, and it was an MMP government, whether you like it or not is beside the point, Te Mana o Te Wai was legislated. And I read from the documentation, local authorities must actively involve tangata whenua in freshwater management, including decision-making processes and monitoring and preparation of policy statements and plans. That was legislated. Doug Leader and I went to Smart Growth and said, this is a big issue. If you read the details, it is going to be very difficult, and this is where the costs are coming up front. Stormwater will not be able to be discharged straight into waterways. It will have to go through stormwater retention ponds with controlled discharges, which is the legislation that I unfortunately have had to put up with in my fertilizer career. If you built a fertilizer plant, you had to capture your own stormwater, control it, and have controlled discharges. Same in the dairy industry. Unfortunately, for some reason, local government in their subdivisions has no such legislation. Doug Leader and I campaigned very hard at Smart Growth to get them to pick it up, but we couldn't get the support. And unfortunately, this legislation has gone through. It's the law. But I believe that, as you've seen recently, the government has put this legislation on pause. It was supposed to be read before council. We, and I'm talking out of school a little bit, I don't know where some of you view where I sit. We have made it very clear, and I've also circulated to all councillors the Entity C submission to that group last week, because it is a public document. You can see government has said, yes, we understand, and we will look at other options. So they put it on hold. They also agreed yesterday with, as I said earlier on, between the National Party and the ACT Party, that there is provision in the legislation to avoid privatisation that will take 75% of the whole parliament. So I believe there is a way forward, and I've heard it said before, and I agree with it completely. I believe we will achieve far more by being in the tent. I think one of the things that has made it attractive is Western Bay is one of the few councils that has put its assets in place. What irks some of us, and this is, I've been very critical at Smart Growth, the regional council forced us to put a facility in at Ongaree Point for 67 houses, forced us to do something at Te Puna West for about 170 houses, but Tāne Atua, Te Teko, and the list goes on around our district, they have no requirement. The inconsistency which has come out of this inconsistency has been exposed, that the regional councils have been less than effective in how they have. So that's where Taumata came in across the top of them. The legislation and the discharge conditions for wastewater and for stormwater will be mandated. Where the other issue I've got is this comment about governance by 50% Maori. That is wrong. The documentation says, and one of the things this group is working on is what is the skill set required of the people that are going to be at the government. It will be a meritocracy. It is not 30% Maori and 30% local government. There will be a panel that works out the qualification of those people that come through. So it's very, very different. And I think some of the misinformation has been mischievous, to say the least. I have been passionate about this. Yes, I accept. Unfortunately, I didn't have the support in 2013 and 14 when it was going through the House and it was legislated by the National Party. When I sat my very first meeting as the mayor with Nick Smith in here and said, do you understand what you're doing by disallowing wastewater discharges into waterways? Most of those towns on the Wanganui River, ourselves, where the water comes from the lakes, all of those on the Waikato River, the Waimaka area in the South Island, they're not going to be able to discharge on a worst case scenario. We cannot afford as a nation to do this. Nick Smith really poured me right back in my bottle. But we also were fortunate at that time to have Anne Tolley as a councillor in our district, who was also the Minister of Local Government. So I had time with her and Todd McClay and said, you have a major problem here. When they had a look at it, that is why Anne Tolley brought the cabinet paper forward that there needs to be radical reform of three waters in New Zealand. Local government cannot afford to get themselves out of where they're in, because the freshwater policy will create major problems. So there's some background which I think people are most probably not aware of, and I don't know, it's taken a hell of a lot of reading. But I can't support this because everything that's being said is going to be in there. We want to put alternatives up. That is what we're talking about. That is what I'd much rather spend $15,000 putting a recommendation in, like Entity C have, to say this is what we think is the solution. So I can't support it, I'm sorry. Being the last speaker, the right of reply goes back to you, Mr. Granger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. There's probably little point in the right of reply, as we know how the vote is going to end. But I just want to reflect on something that Mike Yardley said on ZB this week. I seriously believe the government's entire handling of the Three Waters reforms has been dishonest, duplicitous and disreputable. They have not played with a straight bat. And for whatever reason, we have ended up in a situation where we have been mandated to do something, and it is not necessarily the best way. Nobody at all disagrees with the fact that there are people out there, councils out there, who are not performing well, who are operating on expired discharges, and they should be and should have been held to account by the regulators, but they haven't been, and that is something that needs to be remedied. But the point is that the way that the central government has mandated and the structure that they have come up with is not going to work in the way they expect. It's just going to be more levels of bureaucracy, and it is going to be a sad day when it goes through, but we don't have a choice. So thank you, sir.
Right, that is your right to reply. I'll now put the motion. All those, well, I'll just read it so people are aware. It's your, that council joins with, or the alternative is not to. So all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? No. Those in favour, please put your hand up so we can, Councillor Marsh, Granger.
Ranger,
Thwaites, Sol,
Waits, Sol,
Murray Benj,
and Henry.
and Henry. I'm not looking where this is going. Those against?
Sorry,
Denia, Dean, Daly, myself, Scringer, and Gray,
Yep.
which is 6-all. I will I will just use my casting vote against the motion. And in so doing, I believe we are better in the tent doing whatever we can. And I think you'll be quite surprised at how much the government has moved. And that is why they delayed the reading. I don't say we've sorted it out yet, but at least we are working on solutions. And I think you're better to work. This is a negotiation. The other option of going where it was proposed is more in confrontation, and I'm a devout coward and I don't like going down that place. So I declare that motion lost, and with that we'll adjourn for morning tea and back at 11:15. But thank you, councillor, for raising it. It's a sensitive issue. I will also say, unfortunately, it did not meet our standing orders. But the chief executive and I thought it was of such significance that being pedantic over the number of working days was not really going to be in the best interests. So the 5 working days does not include Saturday, Sunday, but we have walked past that because I think we had to have the conversation, and thank you for bringing it forward. Thank you. We're back in session and we have a quorum, so we'll continue on. Back to the agenda. We move to community board minutes for receipt, which is a page 7 to 41. Move Marsh, seconded Murray Benj. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. We now move to page 66, which is the minutes of the council meeting on the 4th of November for receipt. Move it, Councillor Scrimger. Councillor Denia, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. We now move to page 85, which is the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee, 4th of November. There, a mover and second, Councillor Denia, Councillor Granger. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. We now move to page 94, which is the minutes of the District Plan Committee on the 4th of the 11th. A mover of that, please. Councillor Daly, Councillor Murray Benj. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. We now move to page 99, which is a recommendatory report from the Katikati Community Board around the lease of the Middlebrook Drive. Are there any questions of staff? It would appear not. Can somebody move the recommendation? Councillor Denia, Councillor Sol. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. I declare it carried. We now. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. 3. Page 109, the endorsement of the Katikati Mural Town and the Avocado Capital of New Zealand, a recommendatory report from Katikati Community Board. Moved Councillor Henry, seconded Councillor Sol. I put that. All those in favour, please say aye. I'm struggling to keep up here with the hands going up. We now move to page 127, which is the recommendatory report from Performance and Monitoring, re 58 Te Puna Road, wanting connection to the Amakara Transfer Pipeline. Quite happy to move. Thank you. Seconded Councillor Thwaites. Yes, certainly.
I just want to speak, and I feel great sympathy for Rose Chalmers and her Persimmon Lane, because it's a very beautiful, well-invested property. And she has had trouble getting that sewage system up and running. And the one that she's got, which is recommended by the Regional Council, I understand only lasts 10 years. So, and the fact that the system goes past her gate was really sensible that she should actually ask to be connected. The fact that we've decided no does raise the question, though, as to what about other sewage schemes in the future? Because although we're told repeatedly we haven't got the capacity, and then we hear, well, yes, we're making adjustments, so yes, we have got a bit. So a marae goes on, a school goes on, a village that down in Te Puna where some dodgy things have happened, they seem to, and that's a fact, Councillor Denia, and they seem to be able to get away with it by having a new zoning and statement put in whereby they are going to get sewage attached. And for someone like the Persimmon Lane, where they do everything correctly and we charge like wounded bulls, and if you really want to do something in this council, often with things like tea rooms and whatnot, wedding venues, they just go ahead and do it and wait for the council to catch up with them if they can. But in this particular case, she's done everything correctly. And I just want to express my, we've said that we have got no further capacity, and I want to make sure through Mr. Ellis that in fact that is the case. Or can more adjustments be made to the present system, as have been made now, so that in the future we may be able to put more on?
No, sorry, Mr.
Who are not part of a Mokoroa.
We're speaking part for or against the motion. Any other speakers?
Am I allowed to ask a question?
We're way past that. We're into, we've moved the recommendations. I'll put that, all those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. You want that recorded?
No, I just expressed that.
Right, thank you. We now move to page 130, which is the Tourism Bay of Plenty Letter of Expectation. Are there any questions of staff on that? It appears not. Have we got a mover and a seconder then, please, for the recommendations there? Councillor Sol, Councillor Murray Benj, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, no. I declare that carried. We now move to page 135, which is the draft schedule of meetings. It's just for receipt. Recommendations there, 1 to 4. Councillor Henry, Councillor Granger, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. I declare that carried. We now move to page 148, which is the easement to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council for maintenance across the Kaituna Spit Recreation Reserve. This is just formalising what's currently happening. Are there any questions of staff?
Mr. Chairman, nowhere does it say who actually owns Ford Island, who is the title owner, the holder of Ford Island. It does for public island, but not for Ford.
Mr. Ellis will answer that, I'm sure. Thank you.
So the easement relates to the council land, and that's what we're dealing with. Ford Island is the local one of Ford's, and it's a separate agreement between and the regional council and Ford's.
This is to give access for maintenance, basically of the Kaituna estuary and all of that sort of carry across the land.
Maintenance.
For maintenance, yes.
Just for clarification, on page 158, there's a picture showing a yellow line, which looks like where the easement will go, but the track is somewhat to the left of that. And can I just clarify that it's the easement would follow that track path?
I think the intention is for the easement to follow the track. The yellow line is an indicative line. I don't think you're looking to reform the track.
Yes, that's correct.
No, it's you can see where they're using it, and it's basically that. Councillor Granger.
It's an entirely practical solution to the situation that needs to be resolved. And happy to move motions.
Thank you. Somebody second that. Councillor Daly, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Now, if somebody could move us into confidential, please. Councillor Denny, Councillor Daly, I'll put that.